Hi, Jacob. Thanks for sharing your time with me today. It's great to see you. The purpose of today is really to understand your experiences with postnatal depression and to hear your story. And before we do that, I have been following you on social media for some time, and I've been super impressed and informed by all the content that you've been sharing around being an ADHD father, as well as your insight and insight into a range of kind of mental health issues that both mums and dads can face. So that's sort of where I kind of came across what you've been doing, and just really wanted to share your wisdom and insight with the sort of broader community, and especially the fatherly dads that are part of our community. And so it'd be wonderful if you could just I know you work on a range of really interesting, amazing things, so it'd be great if you could just give us a little intro to the different things that you're working on, and maybe why as well.
Yeah, sure. So thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on and just chatting about sort of dad stuff, which is always something I'm really positive about and proud to talk about. So yeah, so my name's Jacob. I run a page on Instagram and Twitter called ADHD Father UK, where I sort of highlight things around ADHD, mental health, well-being, as well as like my role as being a dad to two children. Um, so I suppose my day-to-day job is I've worked in NHS mental health services for about 15 years now. So I work in a community mental health team. So we work with people and their families in the community. So I have a caseload of people. I'll see them and support them either with their mental health, or it could be social stuff like benefits or housing or community groups. So I do that 4 days a week, and then one evening a week I work in mother and baby mental health unit. So it's like a mental health unit which the mums will go in with their babies. Most of the mums will come in either just before the baby is delivered and up to a year of the baby's birth. And most of the mums will be struggling with postnatal depression or postpartum psychosis. So I run a dad's group, support group on there, as well as spending time with the mums and talking about lived experience. And that's my normal sort of week doing that sort of stuff. And I sort of got into the sort of mums mental health stuff from struggling with my own mental health after the birth of my second child, where I struggled sort of with postnatal depression. So that's, for me, it's a massive thing I'm really passionate about. One of my family members struggled when I was growing up, so I've seen it from different sides as sort of a child, but also as a parent.
Yeah, and it's yeah, it sounds really important that you're able to bring that personal lived experience to your work with mums and also with dads. So I was just wondering, because I think obviously having a child is a wonderful thing, and it's for a lot of people it's sort of one of the best things that can happen in one's life. And at the same time, there can be sort of difficult feelings and painful sort of emotions and moods that people can go through. And as a society, I think we don't always make enough space for the kind of range of experiences that mums can have, and also that, and especially now, that dads can have. And I think for some people, they may not have even come across postnatal depression in dads. And I think, we both know that as many as 1 in 10 new dads can get postnatal depression. So could you sort of walk us through, a little bit around kind of what postnatal depression is, and how you kind of, how it sort of was something that you experienced?
Yeah, sure. So with my first child, my daughter, I'd struggled with bonding anyway, which I know, like they say, on average, it takes about 9 months for a dad to create that bond with their child. So that helps knowing that stat that it wasn't a quick fix. But it took a little bit of time after. It was definitely longer than 9 months with my daughter. I had to actively do a lot of things, like go to a lot of groups, spend that one-to-one time, and have that time with my daughter to build that bond. So I knew that would probably be the same for my son. And when he was born, I remember sort of he came out and looked, it was like something that clicked straight away. I remember looking at him going, that's not my child. Like knowing it was, but like just feeling like straight away, like there's no connection there. And I think I even joked about like at the time going, oh, he looks like if a bank manager was going to have a baby, he'd look like that. Because my daughter was born, like I had blonde hair, blue eyes growing up. My daughter had blonde hair, blue eyes when she was born. My son had dark eyes, brown hair, like long. And I was like, it just doesn't look nothing like me. And then I think I just went, well, you know, these feelings will go. And obviously then cared for my wife and my babies, and then being the dad of two, you're just always working and always doing something. And so like carried on, and if I'm totally honest, I don't think I noticed it. And you'd think like working in mental health, I would have got it. I think because I've worked in quite serious mental health, secondary mental health services, most of the people with depression I've worked with had severe depression. So that was my sort of representation, my view of what depression was. So I was like, well, I can't be depressed because I'm going to work, I've got a family, I'm going to like, you know, doing nice things. But I wasn't happy. And it basically came down to watching probably, I think I watched an old video, like an old like recording of my wedding day, and which was like 4 years before, and I was just like, that's not the same person. I could like, it was like looking at someone different. I was like, this person seems so happy, so confident. That's just not where I am now. And then a family member, I said, oh, I think I'm struggling. And luckily, my colleague is a really good friend of mine. She was like, look, there's a depression scale. We can get one online. We'll do it together. And ask me questions. I just did it. I was like, I'm not that bad, am I? She was like, yeah, it says you're severely depressed. I was like, oh. And then, like, I sort of spoke about it to my family, and they're like, yeah, we've noticed that, like, for the last sort of 2 years. And then, sort of at the height of it, the worst, I remember, like, I'd worked with loads of people that had panic attacks, but I thought, oh, I imagine I know what it feels like. And then I had one, I remember doing like feeding my son whilst my daughter was having her food. And I think my wife just went outside in the garden to put some washing out on the line or something. I remember having one there and thinking like, oh my God, like she needs to come in. I can't leave. It was like I was frozen for a couple of minutes. And I remember it's like the worst feeling, like literally the worst feeling I've had in my life. And that is worse, I'd say. Before I seeked help, I was having suicidal thoughts, thinking like, you know, which what I learned now, actually it's quite common, those low level suicidal thoughts of like, I don't want to be here, I sort of want to kill myself, but it's more like, for me, it was like, I just don't want to be here. I don't actually want to kill myself, but I don't want to exist. And then I would have thoughts of like, when I was in my job, I do a lot of driving to like people's houses. Some of the drives are about 45-minute drive. And like, I was just remember thinking, oh, I could easily crash the car here and it would be quite simple to do. And at that point, I just thought nothing good is coming from this. I need to like seek help. And I remember like my mum at the time being pretty hard on me, which for me worked. I wouldn't recommend it, but she was just like, you need to sort of shit out because, you know, you're going to lose everything otherwise. So I went to the doctor, got started on some antidepressants, and for the next couple of weeks, it was just tricky. Like, and I had to actively push things like going for walks. And that was a game changer. Just luckily where I live, there's quite a lot of green space. So like, I really don't want to go for a walk, but I'll just do 10 minutes, right? I'll do 20 minutes and then I'll do a half an hour. And, you know, anyone who's a dad, especially of two, knows there's no time really that you have to yourself. So having like, right, I've got 20 minutes before we do dinner, I can just walk around the block, and just doing those little mini ones just really helped. and looking at what my sort of what I was doing to maintain my well-being. And if I looked after my well-being, that would look after my mental health. So as long as I was doing regular exercise, I looked after my sleep. Sleep was a big one for me. If I have like 3 or 4 nights bad sleep, that will start making things changing the way I'm feeling around sort of just certain things. So sleep, exercise, eating well, and having people around me, people to say who have been through similar experiences, was a game changer. So like none of my friends had openly talked about their mental health. So that's where I went online. I think I just looked at hashtags like, I don't know, depression, parenthood. And most, there's good bits and bad bits. Unfortunately, on social media, there's mainly mums. But actually, that was fine. And I spoke to a few and then met up with a couple in my area. And there's something about, now I'm in a place with my wife where we can openly talk about if I'm struggling with my depression, I'll say. But at that early stage, I just didn't feel, I felt like I had to, as a dad, had to hold back, and I couldn't burden her about saying, oh, I'm struggling with suicidal thoughts. So to have someone that was not part of my family that I could go to, that had those same experiences as me, was great. And there was a mum that was now a good friend of mine, and we went for a walk, and we were just joking about suicidal thoughts or like depression, and having that and feeling like I could say it without no stigma, without no sort of no one going to judge me as a parent, was great. And that built that confidence. So I'm a big like supporter of that peer-to-peer support, and especially like dads supporting each other, and going, actually, we have it's a really hard job, especially being a parent. In some ways, I would say, especially being a dad, because there's not much. We're not very good at sharing how we're struggling, and so we have to work a little bit harder. And because we've been brought up and are of men before us not talking about their mental health or their feelings, so we're having to relearn those things, which is really tricky.
Yeah, right. So you feel that at the moment, dads are sort of having to relearn how to express their feelings, or express vulnerability, or express feelings.
Yeah, and it's really hard. Like, I'm at a stage now where I'm okay with that, but it wasn't easy. It was tricky, and yeah, and even now, there's sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't feel comfortable doing that. But actually, I know what happens if I don't do that, like long term, and from the people I work with, like not talking about it doesn't help. Doesn't like help you feel better about yourself. Doesn't help you feel like positive for the future. Like now, I think if I could talk about, like I say on a podcast, if I could talk about killing myself, like or thinking about killing myself, anything else is easy. So like literally nothing else scared me. So that's the good bit. I feel like I own my own mental health now, like the good and the bad of it. And I'm not going to be held back by that stigma. But that takes time. That takes, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it and we wouldn't have mental health services. But like, it could just at those early stages, just watching podcasts or listening to podcasts of like dads talking about their experiences, or reading articles, watching YouTube videos of people. And sometimes even if you're not at that stage where you're ready to express your like emotions or feelings, just hearing a positive representation around you sometimes can be really helpful in sort of like building that confidence up.
And do you think the culture has changed now, where there's less stigma to talk about either men's mental health or fathers' mental health or postnatal depression?
I think it's still there. It's definitely still there. I think it's ingrained in us as men to not talk about our feelings and emotions. So we have to work harder at it. I play in a like dad's football social thing every Tuesday evening, and we've got a WhatsApp group. And if I know my wife's WhatsApp groups, they'll talk about their feelings. Oh God, I've had a terrible day at work, and they'll talk about those low level stuff that then reduces all those levels. Guys, we don't do that, and like so, there's a few of us that work in mental health that are part of this WhatsApp group, and so we've actively, slowly been influencing the group. And oh, has anyone read this article about like postnatal depression, or what do people think about this? And it actually changed where one of the guys posted an article he had done about his dad dying and how that had affected him. And I forget, actually, we're a lot older than probably we like to think. And so there was a lot of dads in the WhatsApp group that had lost their dad, some young and some older. And actually that it felt like it wasn't mental health where you're going to get stigma, but saying, oh, I lost my dad really affected me. And that just changed the dynamics of the group. But 5 of the dads said, oh yeah, I was like really struggled after my dad. I felt like I had no one to go to and all this. And so that just changes the dynamics. And now, like, I'll openly say if I'm struggling, oh, I can't make it this week. And then they'll go, oh, come on, just come and watch. And that gets me out of the house. Sometimes I've gone and I'm really not wanting to go, but it's helped. But yeah, I think the stigma is definitely still there, but it's getting better. And that only gets better in time with more people sharing their experiences.
Yeah. And do you mind telling us a little bit about, I mean, and obviously it's only if you feel comfortable, but how it was for your partner, because obviously it sounded like that was, you then explained how you'd been feeling, right?
Yeah.
And I just wondered how she was around that time, and how it was for you in your relationship, then sort of sharing what was really going on.
Yeah, I imagine it was really difficult. And some of those difficult conversations we had were about when I first seen my son, because that experience, we're told, oh, it's the best experience of your life. Then actually saying to my wife, it wasn't actually. I thought he wasn't mine, and actually, it's quite a negative. Like, I now view that experience as the start of my depression, where she would say, oh, that was like an amazing moment for her. So that was difficult, and actually explaining that is not, because it's so easy for us to get, like, if I'm saying I'm struggling with my postnatal depression because of my son, the easy cop out thing is, oh, yeah, but you do love him, or like, he's lovely. I know he's lovely. I know deep down I love him, but sometimes it's hard to express that if you're struggling with depression. And especially to your partner, like my wife had never worked in mental health, so she didn't really have that knowledge of that stuff. So having to explain it to her, look, I'm going to tell you stuff. It's going to be quite hard to take, but this doesn't change how much I love you, the children, or anything. But if I don't tell you this, things will get worse. So just understand, let me tell me the story, and then we can like pull out the bits. But let's not forget, the whole way through this, nothing changes with that love, and how I need to, like, what things, and most of it isn't a representation or anything to do with you. It's my own sort of shit that I need to work through. I just need you to sort of be there and listen and be open to what we're going to talk about. I know some of the challenging bits were, like, especially like with this woman I met, like, sounds dodgy, like I met online through social media, who had lived experiences. Saying to your wife, look, I'm going to take, one of the kids to go for a walk with someone that I've met online who's got similar experiences than me, to talk about my emotions and my mental health. I imagine that must have been really hard for her to go, right, you're going off with some person you've never met before to talk more openly with them than you have to me. And I imagine that would have been, she would have probably, I know she took that as a personal sort of attack on her, or, why can't you go to your wife? But actually, I said, look, it's nothing to do with you in some way. It's my own stuff. And actually, I need a space where I can express it. And I think, especially as dads, and parents who struggle with their mental health, sometimes, though, even though they are your loved ones, those are the people you feel like you have to protect. So the bits around suicide, I felt like I couldn't really talk openly about them to my wife at that time. I needed someone that was sort of impartial, and separated from the family, who I could say, oh my God, I really want to crash the car, and they weren't going to be surprised or shocked. It was someone who probably had those same thoughts. Or I could say, that baby wasn't mine, and they would go, oh my God, I felt the same way. They're not going to go, yeah, but it is your baby, you know, come on, you just need to love it more. So that really helped. And I imagine it would have been really hard for her. Like now we're at a stage where I can say those conversations. And that's come with her probably amazingness to understand it's nothing, it's not a personal thing to her, or it's actually, it's how she can support me in a way, even in ways that she doesn't agree in. And that is, as a parent and a partner, I imagine, horrendous. And there's bits around like I'm so if it was her that was struggling with my mental health, I know I would be feeling I failed here as a husband because she's struggling because even though I know that's not the case. So I imagine there was bits where she felt like I'm a terrible wife because why didn't I help my husband? But it wasn't anything. It's nothing. I had nothing to do with her. And she could have done everything, and it still wouldn't have made a difference in some ways. For me, I feel like I had to go through that journey to be like where I am now. So it's a really tricky bit. I think I don't know if she had someone to speak to. I imagine she spoke to my mum about some of it. But I don't know if she had any friends whose partners had struggled. I don't think she probably did. So I imagine there was times of feeling lonely, scared, worried about the future, worried about if your husband's going to kill themselves. And so if it was me, I would like if I was chatting to like now a dad whose wife was struggling, looking at stories of success is helpful. So like looking at other mums who have beaten postpartum psychosis and now thriving in their life, or postnatal depression, who are now set up a business where they help people, reading articles of dads that have struggled with their mental health, and engaging yourself in those communities is a game changer, because then you go, oh, I'm not, like for me, I'm surrounded every week by people that are struggling with mental health. So for me, mental health is a very normal subject to talk about. So when I go to places that aren't in those industries or around those people, and they're tiptoeing about talking about anxiety, I'm like, what are you on about? Like it's completely like a different area for me. It's like a different world. So but in my job, I have to be aware of that. Like working in working class areas where there is no representation of positive role models of mental health, like that stigma is still 100% there. So listening to those dads in particular and going, look, these are some great resources. Watch this, listen to this. You know, if you've got like a newborn baby or two babies, if someone sends you loads of leaflets, you ain't going to read it. It's just not going to happen. But like, send them like a 5-minute YouTube video or a short podcast where they can listen to if they're doing the night feeds, or if they're driving to work, they can listen to that on the car journey, on the train journey. Those are like those little bite-sized bits of hope are really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, such an important lesson, and you often hear about healthcare providers complaining about people not using resources that they've created, and I think that's just such a good point, is that healthcare resources need to be sort of accessible in ways that people, you know, especially if it's a difficult issue, they need to be relatable.
Yeah.
A kind of sort of
And that's
clinical
what we create
basis.
on the mother and baby unit. I got in there, and I suppose because it wasn't my board, it's like I'm a guest in a hotel. Like you pick all the faults. And I remember going, so much resources here, but it's all like written in small writing. No one's gonna like. That's the last thing anyone's gonna want to do is read a leaflet about postnatal depression. So we created like a link tree with loads of great videos of people talking about their experiences with a QR code, so the moms can just go bang, use the QR code, and it'll have a list of like, longest one I think is an hour, but loads of like YouTube videos, visual podcasts where they can watch along, like little short articles. And yeah, you have to change with the times, especially with parents where like time is like a luxury.
Right, absolutely. And everyone's multitasking a lot of the time.
Mm.
And what do you think, you know, just for mums or dads that maybe sort of didn't have a history of depression, but then after they had a baby, it sort of just hit them out of the blue, whether it's psychosis or depression, you know. Do you find that in your kind of work with mums and
Yeah,
dads?
like I've never struggled with mental health before. For my like I've growing up, I never had those experiences, never had like panic attack or nothing. So for me, it was literally out of the blue. I was like, oh god. So I'd say don't like the one thing parenting is, oh my god, it's never going to be, everything's changed. Like the relationship's going to be different. But my relationship with my son is 100% better now because of my struggles than it would have been otherwise, because I've had to work really hard on building that bond. And I think there's something that we've been through together that is very different in my relationship with my daughter. And so like there's times where it was tricky, like where he's definitely, you know, it doesn't help, he's definitely a mummy's boy. But there was times where like we had to make it difficult to get through those difficult bits. So like he would happily have my wife put to bed every night, and he would be like the happiest man alive. But we now take it in turns because it's probably better for me to go through this difficult. So at the beginning, he was like, "No, I want mummy, I want mummy," and that was brutal. When I'm not struggling with that bond anyway. But now, like last night, I was brushing my daughter's teeth, and he was like, "I want daddy," and like even though he was crying, I was so happy. I was like, "Ah, oh, he wants daddy." I walked in, I was like, "Ah, it's all right, don't worry. He wants his daddy. That's fine." But you need to get through those hard bits to build those bonds, and so yeah, any parent that going through that, I'd just say it will improve, it will get better. It is hard at times, and you do have to work on it. I think that was the big thing I underestimated of to keep myself well. I have to every week, you know, I hate exercise really. I like football, but other than that, I don't like exercise. But I have to do my exercise, so I choose to cycle to work every week. I don't enjoy it. If anything, I dislike it, but that keeps me well. So if that keeps me well, I'll do it. So some of the things I have to, or like we've been away on holiday, and I've just needed some time just to go to my wife. Look, do you mind just watching the kids for like 20 minutes while I go for a walk? You know, I know that will put pressure on her, but in the long term, she understands if I don't go on the walk, long term it could be, you know, I struggle with my mental health again. So those quick little bits are really helpful. And so she's really understanding of going, if I'm asking for it, it's for a reason. I don't take the piss, and it's not like I do it all the time. So when I do it, she understands, right. Or sometimes she knows she has to be the person that goes, I think you should go for a walk today, or I think you should I think you should go to football today. When I'm like, oh, I'm really tired. She goes, you always feel better after doing it. So I go. So yeah, I think it's holding on to hope that it will get better.
Yeah, that sounds yeah, that's really helpful actually. And your partner sounds really wonderful as well. And I was just wondering, some of the dads that I've spoken to often say, oh, I know what I need to do for my self-care. Like I know I need to go to the gym or go for a walk, but I just can't motivate myself to do it. What do you have any advice for that? I mean, obviously anyone,
Yeah.
we all feel like that sometimes.
Yeah, I think like, so I say to my wife, look, sometimes I need you to say to me, get off your arse and go. You need to do it. And it works the same way for her. Like, so she finds going to the gym really helpful. So sometimes I'm like, are you going to the gym this week? And it's not like you need to go to the gym sort of way of saying it. It's a way of saying, look, that's, you know, I'm going to be your little coach and your promoter if you need that, or someone to give you be a cheerleader. So having those open conversations with your partner and saying, look, sometimes I need you to give me a bit of a kick up the arse and push me there, and not give me an easy out. So if I go, oh, should we, or I could go out to the gym, or we could get takeaway. Sometimes it's nice to go, yeah, let's have a takeaway. But actually going, the hardest thing is going, nah, let's actually just go out and do it. But I think like I've never gone on a walk when I've not wanted to go and come back and felt worse. Every time I've really not wanted to do something, like go for a walk or get some fresh air or talk to someone, I've never come back going, oh, I feel worse. Every time I've gone, I always feel better. And like for me, walking was a great one. like I could listen to the podcast. Sometimes I didn't. I could listen to podcasts, or I could just go for a walk. It was free. It was accessible. I could literally just go, right, I've got 20 minutes before bath time routine, go for a walk around the block. And then that led to me doing like nicer walks where I drive to nice places. But sometimes it's just as simple as that. But sometimes it's just that first step. That's always the hardest one. The hardest one, like time, is the first time you go to the, and don't underestimate that. And so when you do it, go be a bit of a cheerleader for yourself and go, look, I didn't do it, and now I have done it, and it will get better. So the first step is always the hardest one, and appreciate when you do it. Give yourself, some praise for that.
Yeah. So just to sort of summarize, I guess, so you're saying having a person that can hold you accountable, like in your case, it's your partner, but I guess for someone who doesn't have a partner, it could be their friend or their work colleague.
Even some people, I know some people that have it on like their phones, like as a reminder, right? Walking group, or walk or exercise, or like for me, it's a big thing is a part of my looking after my well-being is time for myself away from my role as a dad or a husband. So I'll sit and watch a film, or I'll do something for me. So it might be go to the cinema or go swimming or something that's just for me, that I can go, that's me. And the other thing is like having a nice bath. So I'll be like, right, I'm gonna have a nice bath, put some like nice bowl bath in there, and just listen to some music, some like really music that makes me happy, and prioritizing that and making you time a priority, which traditionally dads, we are normally the last in the pecking line, but sometimes actually going, and it's not like saying, right, me time is going to the pub and getting pissed. It's actually like positive things where you're not going to feel like a hangover. So positive things, right, me time is, sitting down, doing something that isn't like a negative thing, like drinking or smoking or doing drugs or something like that. Something that actually is building back up that well-being.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Me time often gets sort of linked to women or girls more, like having me time, when it's just as relevant to anyone of any gender. So yeah, I think that's a really nice point to leave it for today. Thank you so much. It's been really moving, actually, as well as you're just full of wisdom. You're a treasure trove of wisdom from your experiences. So thank you so much. And if anyone wants to follow up with Jacob, you can find him on Instagram and Twitter, and and there's more resources to do with Jacob on the internet, on YouTube and so on. So do get in touch, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So if you've got any questions or you want any resources, just catch me on at ADHD Father UK.